The concept for EPARTRADE is basically, in my opinion, there's a big hole in the internet. So the internet started many years ago, but there's never been an online business community for racers on the World Wide Web. The need for EPARTRADE is actually quite obvious. Basically, people in the business of auto racing need a place online to hang out and get their problems solved.
It's extremely simple for a buyer or for a supplier to interact on the platform. The first thing you need to do is sign in, which is free. And the second thing is, when you see a product that you're interested in, all you need to do is click on request more information. If it's a company, you click on request more information, and then from there, it is forwarded directly to the buyer or to the supplier.
You can go to epartrade.com, you become part of a community of businesses in racing, and it makes sourcing products much easier than just on the internet or using Google.
At EPARTRADE, there is no e-commerce. It's literally a connection just like at a trade show. So now, any time of the year, a buyer could reach out to a supplier through an email.
More than that, it's a place to go just to keep current every day. So it's a good place to start your workday in your racing business or in your offices of your professional race team. And you know you're current when it comes to new technology, industry news, technical papers, technical videos, all of that and more. We're not looking for a million hits per day. All we want is people who are really the volume buyers of racing products in the racing industry to be part of the little world of EPARTRADE. We have racing businesses participating from around the world. So you get suppliers from around the world, you get buyers from around the world.
EPARTRADE really eliminates having to travel, closing down your shop. Now you have a place to showcase globally your racing product and technology.
Good morning from California. It is 9 o'clock here. Welcome to Race Industry Now, the technical and business webinar series presented to you by EPARTRADE. I am Francisque Savignan, the founder and CEO of EPARTRADE, and with me this morning we have three special guests: Gillie, the co-founder of EPARTRADE, and our two wonderful hosts, Mr. Brad Gillie and Mr. Jeff Hammond. Good morning. How are you guys doing?
Great, thank you.
Very good.
Good morning, everyone. Doing well.
And we got Kelly Crandall as well. So Judy?
Well, we had some big news to announce. We brought on two former PRI people, Laura Vukic, who we worked with for over 2 decades, and also Heidi Hess. And why this is important to the industry is because we just give good old-fashioned customer service from people that know this industry. So that was big news for us. In addition, I want to say thank you, Brad, Jeff, because I caught the tail end of the late shift last night and you were talking about the platform. Thank you.
It's worth talking about.
Yeah, the opportunity was there, and in his usual manner, Brad was able to recognize that, and he brought it up, and it just fit right into what we were doing last night. And again, the product that you bring helps so many people in racing. We want everybody around the world, especially listeners for SiriusXM, to know about it.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank
you. So as we mentioned, when we started the series in February this year, we have shortened a little bit the time because people are busy. So you guys are on for the next 45 minutes. Good morning, Kelly. Welcome back to the show. So Jeff and Brad, on to you.
Thank you, Francis. Thank you very much, Judy. We appreciate it. And what's great about today is we get to talk about the sport that we love and that we are immersed in. Look, we love all forms of motorsports, and it doesn't matter what it is for me: 2 wheels, 4 wheels, on water, off-road, whatever it might be, anything with an engine, I'm always a big fan of, and it's great we get to talk about all of that at EPARTRADE. But NASCAR did just start the 2022 season over the past few weeks, actually, because a couple of weeks ago, it was the Los Angeles Coliseum that they converted into a quarter-mile racetrack and put on a thrilling show. And of course, this past Sunday, the 64th Daytona 500, and a big race weekend there with the rookie driver in victory lane. But there's a lot new in NASCAR this year that we're going to be talking about as well. And Jeff Hammond, being a 2-time championship winning crew chief, a winner of 43 races on the schedule. And these numbers, by the way, are just his crew chief numbers. You can pretty much double and maybe even triple some of that when you consider everything that he was a part of back in the days with Junior Johnson, and then everything he did with Darrell Waltrip as well. Kelly Crandall covers everything for Racer.com, does a fantastic job of doing that as well. Award-winning journalist and a lot of fun to talk about. So it's great because, again, everything is new. And Jeff Hammond, we like to joke that, well, you were here before they had engines and it was horses and buggies, but now we've got a big change for 2022. So next gen is here.
Yes, it is. And yes, you're not too far wrong. I've been around for a while. I think Dick Berger and I agreed one time that, you know, he was working on the right side of Ben-Hur's chariot while I was working on the left. So we've had a lot of fun, and I've had a lot of fun in this industry for many years. But what is going on today, I think Kelly will agree, because again, she's been down to Daytona, witnessed it firsthand. You have too, Brad. But in talking to some crew chiefs and things, we are in a revolutionary period as far as NASCAR is concerned, because we are totally redefining what NASCAR is today with modern technology, independent suspension, sequential transaxles. I mean, you name it. The list is long, and it's just a lot of things that NASCAR has never done before in this new Gen 6 car. And I'm just excited how well everything is going so early in the history of this thing, because it turned at LA Coliseum like I've never seen a stock car turn on a really quarter-mile racetrack. And all the drafting and everything that was learned over this past weekend at Daytona has told us that we've started a new era, and we've got a lot of work to do, but it's very, very, very promising.
It is for sure. But before we really continue, I do want to let you know that if you have a question for any of us, any of the panelists here, you can type it down in the chat. And we're going to be talking about everything that's new in NASCAR this season, starting in 2022. But we also want to know what you want to know. So if you have a question, feel free to type it in. You know, Kelly, covering this really over the past few weeks, and not even just the past few weeks, but look, let's go back to when the checkered flag flew in the season finale at Phoenix and Kyle Larson was crowned champion. Pretty much at that point on, it was about testing this next gen car, continuing to develop it, and getting it ready for the racetrack. So what are some of the highlights of your coverage so far?
Yeah, you knew once we left Phoenix that everything was changing. We were entering a new era, and that next gen era. It's pretty funny how NASCAR's kind of adopted that for everything. It's the car, it's the schedule, it's just everything going on with this sport. So you come into a new season and you look at new teams and drivers in new places, or new drivers and things like that. But as Jeff was talking about with this race car, it's completely new. I mean, it's something to where I remember standing in the Ford Tech Center last year when they were helping us go through a deep dive of this race car. And I remember standing there and then posting a picture later on of the car and just saying, everything under the skin of this race car is different, and I don't understand any of it. It's completely different from top to bottom. So we're only one race in. So when you talk about highlights, I mean, the Daytona 500 to me looked like a typical Daytona 500. And I think that's a good thing. I don't think the car was a story. Of course, there was things that happened with loose wheels, and the Colleague Racing might have had something break under their car. I think they had a tire problem. So for right now, I wouldn't really say there's been too many big highlights. I think it's just teams and drivers getting used to something different. The feel is different. It handles different. And the teams have to get used to what they can work on, what they can touch, how long it takes to work on this race car. So it'll be interesting as we get some more races under our belt to see if it is noticeably different. But I think for Daytona, it was a typical speed weeks. And to me, that was a good thing.
Yeah, Jeff, Kelly touched on something too. One of the bigger changes in this car, something that is really a drastic difference from what we've had in years past, are the wheels, the 18-inch wheels, but with the center lock. And you have a pit road school. You actually coach people to become pit crew members, and a lot of people going over the wall week in and week out are a product of that. So how different is this? How much of a departure is this as we've evolved the technology of the NASCAR Cup car?
Well, fortunately, the choreographing of the whole pit stop did not get radically, redone. I mean, a lot of guys experimented with which way was the best way for the rear tire changer to come, because a lot of people are really focusing on the bigger fuel cell and the way that the car is being needing more time to get fuel in it. They were trying to figure out how can we help that gas man get to the car quicker and be able to, execute his part of it, because that's where really the big slowdown is going to come, is from trying to get the fuel in the car. But the overall choreographing, and as well as, what the guys are doing, they're not going, 5 off, 5 on, but they're having to basically use the same type of muscles, same type of discipline as far as, getting the tire off. And the best thing about it is, remember, we don't have lug nuts flying all over pit road like we used to. So the fact that you've got the nut in the gun, in the socket area, whenever you change the tire, I think is a plus for a lot of the guys. Actually, when you start talking about times, where normally 12 and a half seconds is what we were doing a year ago, realistically, they can change 4 tires in right around 10 seconds. So the potential there for 10-second stops, and something we'll be talking about as we move forward, they'll pop up on the screen from time to time, and people being able to put 2 tires on instead of the 4, they're going to even be faster. The big holdup, like I said, is still going to be the fuel situation. And if anything else comes out of that, I think we were talking last night with John Klossmeyer about some of the difficulties that we're having at Daytona. But all it was is the mounting point was not strong enough. And it's one of the things that we have to, work through. And NASCAR has now allowed the teams to go in there and reinforce that area. So I think the fueling situation is now going to be addressed, fixed, and we'll move on from that. But overall, I think that the pit stop itself is so similar, and these guys are so disciplined. Everybody I've talked to so far, it's not been a big deal. A lot of these teams are doing Xfinity or trucks Friday and on Saturday, and being able to transfer right into the Cup Series on Sunday with not a lot of problem. I think you'll see a lot of them just going through with all the practice jigs that are there on pit road, just kind of redefining and getting their rhythm down. But because they can slow down to go fast, I think these guys have pretty much got it figured out early in the season. And I don't think it's going to be any kind of problem moving on.
Jeff, I want to stick with you real quick because we just had a question pop up in the chat. The question is, why did NASCAR put a restrictor in the dump cans? Now, there are some issues that are making fueling slower, denser foam actually in the newer fuel cell. But you alluded to this when we did talk to Chase Briscoe's crew chief last night, Johnny Klossmeyer. Again, once you get these cars into battle, into competition, some things are going to turn up that were unanticipated. And it was kind of fascinating to realize that, hey, maybe we needed to reinforce that area where the filler is.
Well, you got to also remember, this is the first year the Cup cars are running, carbon fiber body parts. I mean, that's the whole thing, is this is an area that was normally constructed by the teams, and that's not the case right now. It's coming in on the quarter panel. It's already pre-made, pre-molded. And I don't think anybody realized that was a weak link. And they found that out once they got into competition. When you're around the shop, you're not necessarily, slamming into the car that you're going to race that weekend with a gas can with 90 pounds of weight, as well as whatever force the big old strong gas guy, the refueler guy, hits the side of a car. I mean, it's when you watch these guys, I mean, it's almost will take your breath away how hard they hit the car trying to get the thing to open up and take fuel as quick as they can.
Yeah, and the cans haven't changed and the connection hasn't changed, but
No.
it goes, there are a couple of factors that come into play. Number one, we went from what was a dimensional measurement in building a fuel cell that was about 18 and a half gallons to now a fuel cell that comes in at a capacity that's around 22, 24 gallons. So that's why you can, you can put more fuel in it, but it takes longer to do. And then with denser foam inside of it, it might go into it differently, but it doesn't change on the fuel can side of things. It's everything beyond that. So maybe it gives the perception that, hey, it's going slower. It's just you can put more in now, right?
That's exactly right. And all these factors, and crew chiefs are taking into consideration of actually the cars burning more fuel. At least it did, at Daytona, because the cars got more drag. The guys, are finding that the fuel mileage that they got a year ago is not quite as good. This upcoming weekend, once again, that'll be something that'll have to be reevaluated and calculated in as we go into the guys preparing their race strategy on Sunday. So all these factors, it's going to be like I say, a work in progress, and everybody, I think, is up for the challenge, but these are some of the nuances that are going to create issues, and we're going to have questions about, and from time to time, we're going to say, uh-oh, that guy right there, he blew it. Well, it's all because it's all new. and we're going to make mistakes. And promise you, when you're on the top of a box and everybody's hollering and carrying on, trying to be under control. Let's make sure you understand it. We try to be under control. But when somebody says caution coming out or something's happening and you're trying to make decisions, sometimes it gets a little out of control and people make mistakes.
Yeah. And you're probably going to hear us refer to new technology. We are very well aware it's new to NASCAR technology. We know that center lock wheels have been used in road racing and open wheel for years, that, moving to a gearbox and a transaxle and a prop shaft and all of that is nothing new to racing. And the way that you build a center section with the bolt-on front and rear clip is not new to racing. But when we say that, we realize it's just new to NASCAR, not new to racing. But Kelly, in dealing with that, the teams were pretty busy, and everything has changed for them in what they're doing at the race shop and what they're doing at the racetrack. And, I think we went from one place at the end of the season last year and even that first test at Charlotte to another place now that this is really in their hands and they're able to do it themselves. But the fact is that there has been one manufacturer that has taken every single checkered flag when it comes to racing competition, be it Los Angeles, the dual races to the Daytona 500, and that's been Ford. Is this the early trend, or do you just think it's worked out that way?
Well, I think it's too early to say if it's going to be a trend, but I will say that it's not surprising when you think of the fact that it's a super speedway race and Ford puts a lot of effort into their super speedway efforts. So when it's Roush Yates engines, we know how seriously Doug Yates and everyone on his team takes the Daytona 500 particularly. And Ford's won 4 of the last 5 super speedway races. So to me, seeing what they did in Daytona was not out of the ordinary. I kind of expected it, to be honest with you. They also have a group of drivers that are very committed to each other. They're very committed to working in the draft, that one Ford notion, and knowing that we have to get to the end of the race and work together to give ourselves a better shot. So again, it's too early to say if this is going to be a trend. I think you have to look at the Daytona 500 as a separate entity than maybe what we're going to see the rest of the year, right? Daytona is Daytona. It's its own race. It has its own prestige and meaning behind it. Now we're going to get into the season and we're going to go to the West Coast and Atlanta, and we're going to get into seeing, okay, who has what, who is really tackled and is on top of this next gen race car. So to me, Daytona was Daytona, and Ford, again, is very good when it comes to these super speedway races. So I think that is a trend in itself, is just expecting them to be very good at Daytona and Talladega.
Kelly, I bet if we go back over the last 5 or 6 years of stories you've written during the Daytona 500 and you just pulled like the Cliff Notes version out of those, the storyline would essentially be Hendrick Motorsports qualified on the front row and Team Penske was in contention for a win at the end. That dates back not just to Sunday and this past week, but that dates back a long time. So really, we didn't see the end result being much new. We just got to see it with a different race car.
Right. And again, Team Hendrick Motorsports, they put a lot of emphasis on qualifying, and they admit that because they believe that with the few days in between qualifying and Sunday's Daytona 500, that all of that attention for them is a positive. It helps them sell cars. It helps showcase their power. And that's what they're focused on, right? Whereas other teams are focused on, we have to get to Sunday and we don't necessarily care where we start. We're focused on how's our car handling and going into that race. So, an argument can be made that maybe Hendrick Motorsports has hurt themselves the last couple of years because they haven't won a Daytona 500 since 2014 with Dale Earnhardt Jr. But again, that's their strategy. They believe that winning the pole is very, very important. And again, it showcases their power plants and kind of translates to that win on Sunday, sell on Monday type deal. Whereas again, Ford is very focused on, we have to get in the race. And once we're in the race, we have to work together. And we know we have strength in numbers. And that's what's going to get us to the end. And we're going to go after the victory.
Yeah, for sure. All right, crew chief, as we hear just phrasing being used with some of the technology that's being used in the next gen car, like sequential shifting, I do think sometimes people might misunderstand exactly what that is. Here's something from the chat. It says, not a fan of the paddle shifting. It takes away from driver talent competition, especially on road race courses. Now they are all equally proficient at shifting. I can see equalizing cars, but equalizing driver talent at racecraft is not sporting. My opinion as a racer myself. Well, let's first clear up exactly what the sequential shifting is in these stock cars and how it looks different and how it also looks similar to what we've had before.
Well, some of the things they're saying about the paddle shifting, I think some of the guys have elected, excuse me, not to try to do that because they're so used to have the hands on off the wheel to be able to do that. And the other thing, even as a racer, this is something you're going to have to get used to no matter who you are, what your application you decide to go with. The biggest thing is we've got away from the H pattern that we're so used to seeing throughout all the history of NASCAR, the regular old 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is something that some of the guys have been, struggling with a little bit. Some guys have missed the gates. You hear people talking about the fact that when they come down pit road, they were so used to knocking it in neutral and working on the brakes. And now they're learning, no, I need to get it into second gear, get it down to pit road, but then I need to immediately put it in first gear. So there's so many little nuances that are inside that cockpit that really are not a big deal. It's a good learning curve, I think, this past weekend at Daytona. But when we get places like we're going this weekend, and more importantly, when we go to our first road course, that's when we're going to see the biggest challenge. And we're going to find out where the weak links really are, because I still believe that as much as they've put into developing these products, until you put them under fire, until you wheel hop them, these big heavy cars and some of the areas and some of the things these guys try to do. I've always believed if you give a race car driver a rubber hammer and give them an anvil, they'll tear it up. So that's the way they are with the race cars. I mean, they're going to tear up brakes. They're going to push brakes. We are right now, we are finally in a position to where, we got the best brakes we've ever had in the history of cup racing. We have, but you also got drivers that are going to find out, how far can I go? Where's the limits? We haven't gotten to that point yet on everything we're doing. So it's not just transmissions, it's brakes, it's steering, rack and pinion steering. Once again, something new, something different. And, we had a couple of people last night on our late shift show that were kind of questioning going to the dirt with this new car. I mean, we got a lot of unknowns, and we were asking us questions that I don't think that got for the upcoming race at Bristol. How are we going to present this car to the race fans and to the competitors once we get to Bristol? They wanted to get to Daytona first, and then they got to get to California. They're going to take each race as it comes down the line. Now, when I say that, not to say they're not working on it, but you're not going to maybe know about it until a couple of weeks out. But even though the competitors will. So some of our fans out there that are watching or listening to anything that Kelly's writing or I'm saying or Brad's talking about, a lot of this we're learning just like you are. And sometimes we can't get the information just with a snap of our fingers because we have no playbook. We don't even have anything in our computers that allow us to go back in and look for an answer in the NASCAR rule book, because a lot of these rules and a lot of the I guess you might say upcoming race information is being formulated as we're having this discussion today.
Yeah, for sure. And to that last one, there are no paddle shifts. Everyone has to take their hand off the steering wheel to shift. To Jeff's point, there still is a gear level. It's just sequential instead of an H pattern like what we had before.
And let me try to explain this. If anybody understands this, how the H pattern works, this is going to be real simple. Instead of going doom, 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 now you hold your hand and you just boom, boom, or bam, bam, bam. It's just straight forward or straight back. It's what we're doing. And again, all I can relate to is a couple of dirt cars I've done or sprint cars I've run, which basically have, two speeds in it, got first and second. That's it. Or high and low.
Or direct drive.
Yeah, or direct drive. So, as you say, this is all new, folks. And, don't get confused sometimes with how much technology we have brought into NASCAR at this moment and how much is still out there that we haven't brought in that other series are running.
Yeah, and really the idea of this next gen car, one of the ideas I should say, is you're not equalizing driver talent. Again, especially on a road course, it's up to the driver when they brake, how deep they brake, when they get back into the gas, how they hit the apex of the corner. They do have to take their hands off the wheel to make that shift. All of those things still come into play. And the whole theory is if you've got similar race cars, then the driver talent is what stands out and makes the difference. Kelly, I want to ask you this because I know this is a story that is constantly covered year over year over year, and that would be when can we potentially see a new manufacturer come into NASCAR? And the question is, will the next gen car make it easier for manufacturers to get involved in cup racing? What are you hearing from the garage?
Well, my answer is I don't know, because I don't know if it's so much the car as it's going to be the next engine package, right? And I know NASCAR is hoping that the car, yes, the car is going to be a piece of this that hopefully will be attractive to new OEMs and bring in more manufacturers and give us more parity. But from what I hear and from what I've been told is that it's probably going to be more on what the engine package is going to be, as I just said, because eventually there will be a new engine. It's probably going to be a couple years off because we've just now gotten this new car in play, and teams and everybody are spending a lot of money right now up front to get this car going. So we have to see over time, is this car going to save people money? And then from there, what is the engine package going to be? And I think for manufacturers, that's what the hook is what the engine package looks like. Is there going to be any sort of hybrid that comes with that? I know Toyota and David Wilson has talked about that a lot of, where do we stand on there? How can we bring that into the sport? So from NASCAR standpoint, yes, they're hoping that this will bring more manufacturers into the sport, but I would not be surprised if it doesn't happen right away, because again, the first part of it is understanding what the cost savings is going to be, and we're not going to see that right away. That's going to take time. It's going to take a year, if not two. And then how long does it take to get a new engine to come into play? And again, I was told by David Wilson back in January that that's really been put on the back burner, again, because of everything that's going on with introducing the new race car and everything that has to go on there. And we just spent a whole lot of money doing that. So you can't do everything at once. So I think it will make it easier. I think it will be enticing to manufacturers, but I would not be surprised, again, if it takes some time. Now, there may be one that wants to jump in right away, and I think that could happen sooner rather than later. But before we start seeing 2 or 3, which is, I think NASCAR's magic number has always been 3, maybe 4, I still think is a few years off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the engine is the big deal. And look, quite honestly, there are a lot of manufacturers that are very interested in NASCAR, but they don't build a pushrod V8 engine. And as long as we're running that in under the hoods of these race cars, that may be something that they wait for the next technology of engine to come into play before they see something like that. Jeff, here's a good one for you. Now that everyone knows that every car in the race is identical, how do the OEMs, the manufacturers, have any legit way to promote their brand, technology, acumen? What separates Toyota from Ford, from Chevy?
Wow, that's a pretty good question right there when you start trying to define what exactly makes the difference. I think a lot of it has to do with just the overall look that the guys, each one of the manufacturers, as far as their stylists are concerned, and NASCAR have worked very diligently. To me, when I saw these cars on the racetrack, being able to identify that's a Ford, that's a Mustang, that's a Camaro, the Camry. And I think the other part of it is, I think that when you look at a lot of the advertising that's out there right now, what the direction they seem like they're going in is comparing it to the passenger cars directly. I mean, I think right now the manufacturers are feeling very comfortable of putting these things side by side, and the way the character lines and everything are flowing, and making a commercial that says, hey, you want to, race what we race on Sunday, drive it to work on Monday. There it is. And I think again, the other part of it and the component, I think the manufacturers are a lot more willing to utilize some of their young talent in a lot of their commercials too. And I think that's the other thing. The marketing side of it is not just about wins. It's about personalities. And I think it's some of the personalities that are out there today, and the way that the sport is evolving as we speak, there are opportunities to reintroduce driver personalities to the fans and draw from that. I mean, I think that's one of the key things that, if you look about our sport, is we use a lot of our drivers to sell the different products that make our sport great.
Yeah, that's a great point. A lot of times we're going to go, hey, I want that Mustang because Ryan Blaney drives one. Or to Ford's point, they might have a great highlight of Austin Cindric winning the Daytona 500 and say a Mustang won. And Kelly, you mentioned something a short while ago. the Ford Performance Center. You know, Chevrolet has got theirs. Toyota obviously has theirs. Toyota builds their engines out in Costa Mesa. Ford builds those through Doug Yates up there in Mooresville, North Carolina. Hendrick and Richard Childress Racing have kind of combined their efforts for the engine program. The manufacturers still have that, but Kelly, some of these performance centers and simulators that they have and the technology involved in their engineering really contributes to how their teams do well. I mean, what does it look like in one of those performance centers?
Yeah, and I wanted to jump in on this because it's a good question, but I kind of take issue, and I could be wrong, but I take issue by saying that every car is identical. They're identical in the sense of they're all getting the same parts and pieces. But Jeff, I think you hit on it perfectly. Is for manufacturers, it's very much how they look because they're trying to promote that more with the street version, right? So, you know, Jeff, to Brad, to your question, and then just tying this all together, is that for these OEMs, it's what it looks like on the racetrack. But if you're talking about how they're going to promote themselves, it does go back to those resources. It goes back to how fast can we go? How much power can we make? You know, Doug Yates recently educated me on the fact that, you know, just because NASCAR says it's 510 horsepower at Daytona or it's 670 horsepower for these other races, that doesn't mean that you're capped at exactly that number, right? These engine manufacturers are still making good horsepower. That's how they separate themselves. And you, Brad, as you said, you're talking about these war rooms and these tech centers and simulators. That's how they're going to promote themselves is, yes, we may have all the same parts and pieces that we're building our race cars with, but if we have the best people and we have the best resources, that's how you separate yourself on the racetrack, by putting a good car in your driver's hands and letting them go out and do their job. So it's a little bit of everything. It's, you know, these tech centers, I mean, they've got, oh my gosh, they've got more data than I would even know to list. You know, you mentioned simulators, you've mentioned they're building model race cars, and I'm talking, you know, from scale model to something as big as a table to, you know, life-size race cars. So that is where they separate themselves is, yes, all of these parts are coming from vendors, but you still have really smart people that have to figure out where can we work? What are the areas we can work with? How can we go fast? And that's going to separate Ford, Toyota, and Chevy. But again, I think Jeff hit on it perfectly. To them right now, the biggest deal is what that car looks like and making it relatable to race fans that they can literally go out and buy the same looking car.
Yeah, and, you know, I think, go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to say, just remember one thing, Brad. NASCAR has not walked away from the idea of saying it's stock car racing. That's still what made them great in the very beginning, is stock car racing. And there in lies what I believe they still, that's the mission statement for NASCAR, is working with these manufacturers to make sure they can still say that accurately.
Very true. And we'll talk about that. We have another question in the chat about that as well. But, you know, ultimately, look, we're in the full geekdom of this and want to know everything about the parts and pieces. In the truck series, they were worried about, oh, if everyone's running the same engine, where is our identity? But I still think we're not talking about an Ilmor NT1 engine winning at Daytona. We're talking about a Ford F-150 winning at Daytona. And we're talking about Toyota Tundras and Chevrolet Silverados. And, you know, if you go beyond the core geekdom of the sport and you just look at what it is, people see a Ford Mustang winning the Daytona 500. They see a Toyota Camry finishing second. They might be a fan of Austin Cindric or a fan of Bubba Wallace or a fan of Kyle Larson, and they're looking at Ford, Toyota, and Chevy, and that's what I'm going to be interested in because that's what they're driving. I think the general race fan may not even get as deep in the weeds in talking about something like that. And let's look at drag racing, for example. You know, we've got Dodges out there and we've got Toyotas and we've got Chevys, but essentially when you start to get up into Top Fuel, they're all running a Hemi engine, right? I mean, but you still have manufacturers who want to put their brands on these race cars and go out and sell the cars with those brands. And I think more outside of just the core hardcore fandom, Ford is still going to put an ad in the newspaper or on your favorite website or whatever and say a Ford Mustang just won the Daytona 500. And you know, for the longest time, and Jeff, you experienced this a lot, there's a lot of technology that went into our cars that came out of NASCAR racing, things that were discovered in technologies, whatever it might be. That flow really goes both ways nowadays. There are things that they know about passenger car technology that they can extrapolate and make sense in race car technology and vice versa. And if I'm a Chevrolet fan, for example, and Chevrolet is out there winning races, obviously their engineers know something about how to make these cars go fast. I'm going to have to assume they know something how to make my car better that I might be buying out of the showroom. Jeff, talk about what it was like, back when you were racing, and by the way, Jeff's been racing as recent as last year with SRX and the year before in the Camping World Truck Series. So he's seen the technology evolve.
Well, thank you. And the thing is, Brad, what you're touching on is exactly right. And to what Kelly keeps pointing out, the R&D centers. Why in the world would Chevrolet and Ford move things from Detroit to the Carolinas unless there was a need and a benefit for the overall organization, as well as TRD? TRD has got a place right up here just in Archdale, North Carolina. They may build the engines in California, but they have an R&D center right here within the reach of every one of the Toyota teams, so they can help. Whether it's the truck series or no, it doesn't matter. They're there to support racing for a reason because they see a benefit. I mean, you think about it. When we first heard that Camry was coming on and coming into NASCAR, we all kind of scratched our heads, said they don't look like no stock car. They don't look like a high performance car. But Toyota has gone to great lengths to redesign and give that car that really is almost a four-door passenger family car a look of a hot rod and a sound of a hot rod on the street version. And that's what I was talking about earlier. Everybody has realized, once again, people can be influenced. And if you want to influence, and you got to give them a mixture of all the above. You got to give them a Camaro that's big enough for more than just two people. If you don't want to drive something with just two people, buy you a Corvette. So everybody has worked very hard to not only maintain a presence in NASCAR, but make sure that NASCAR presence can relate and create more sales. And I think they've done a great job.
It's funny, Jeff, you say there about why would any of these OEMs build these R&D centers, right? If they didn't think it's important. Let's not forget Chevrolet is very close to opening the doors on a brand new tech center right there on the Hendrick campus. And that is, again, not only going to offer more resources, but the most important thing, if you're a Chevy fan and if you're a fan of some of the teams like JTG or maybe even Aspire that doesn't get a lot of simulator time, Jim Campbell told me over the weekend at Daytona that by adding another tech center, that's going to give them more simulators, which will give a lot of teams and a lot of drivers that normally don't get sim time are now going to have that at their disposal. So going back to Jeff, what you were just saying, if they didn't think it was important and if it wasn't going to help them in some way stand out, they wouldn't be doing it. And Chevy's about to get the keys to a brand new tech center in Concord.
Yeah, and pretty spectacular what they're doing. One of the questions references stock car racing versus spec race. So yes, there are spec parts in all of this. And Kelly, I do want you to comment on this part of it too here in just a second. But what started out as pulling cars off of the showroom and painting numbers on them and building roll cages in them to just straight up building cars from the ground up. Stock car racing is the style of racing that we do. Sometimes it gets taken literally as, well, these aren't stock cars. Well, yes, they are, because this is the form of racing that we do. It's just not the same car you pull off the showroom floor. Can't imagine hitting the wall with one of those at 200 miles per hour, but they're not designed to do that. But, with that said, sometimes spec could be like a dirty four-letter word in racing, Kelly, but really, if you're an owner in NASCAR and you're writing checks for this and you're looking at the checks you don't have to write, development-wise moving forward, it makes sense to go this direction in stock car racing. Talk about that side of things and why we have evolved into where we are with this type of next gen car.
Yeah, it does make me laugh because that is a four-letter word that for some reason in NASCAR nobody wants to talk about, right? It's taboo. It's just, oh my gosh, what are we doing? This is crazy. But it goes back to what I was talking about earlier. It's all about money, right? And Jeff and Brad, you've both heard this expression. Sometimes we have to save teams from themselves, right? Now, I'm sure that the money that they quote unquote are not having to spend or what they're going to hopefully be saving on next gen, they're just going to find another place to put it. But the point of next gen and the point of these spec parts is that we're trying to save the teams from themselves. And when we really started ramping up with this car over the last 2 years, the one thing that I kept hearing from OEMs and from team owners is the sport is not healthy. We're spending too much money. We have to rein things back in. The business model is broken. And so when you take a car like this, you're again, all of these parts are coming from single source suppliers. So you can say it's spec, you can say that everybody has the same thing, but again, it's all about reining in that spending, and it's all about parts distribution and making sure, now we're putting a cap. The biggest thing is we're putting a cap on car limits. It used to be that a Joe Gibbs or a Rick Hendrick could stand in their shop and look out on the shop floor and see 60 to 70 to however many cars they wanted to build. And sometimes you didn't even use all of them, but you built them, right? Now, each team is capped at 7 cars. So again, it's just going back to, we've got to rein things in a little bit. It's all about the spending. And again, I can't tell you what that's going to look like because we don't know. We're literally one race in. We're 1 points race in. But hopefully we'll see that over the next couple of years is how much of a difference this car does make, right? And is it cutting down on the checks that the teams have to write? And is it doing the things that NASCAR hopes it does in making the business model healthier? So I think there's still questions to be answered on how that's going to work. But the point is, NASCAR and the teams are finally acknowledging that, and they're trying to do something about it. And again, time will tell if they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Jeff, let's get underneath the race car here a little bit, because for years and years and years, we talked about a 9-inch Ford rear end with the straight axle and truck arms with springs. And, look, you could flip over a 1987 IROC Camaro and it would look like what stock car racing looked like up until last year in the Cup Series with some of that same suspension technology, and even further back than that. I get it. But now everything in the back end is completely different. Talk about independent rear suspension and what that might do to change things.
Oh, what does it do to change things? Everything. It's hard to sit here and say, understanding the principles like I do of a stock car. I mean, everything at one time, everything worked off an X. What you did to the right front affected the left rear. What you did to the left front affected the right rear, and vice versa. And still today, with the new independent suspension, it's still relevant that you make all 4 tires work. That's the one thing that everybody in my world, you work toward. You work toward making the car turn. You make it where all of a sudden the left side is taking much of a load and contributing to the handling of the car is the right, if at all possible, and making it to where the driver is happy that all of them are working and not fighting one another. So all they've done is they've opened up Pandora's box to a new world that some of them had some experience with, but a lot of them doesn't. I mean, they have already openly admitted at tests that they think they're going in the right direction, and all of a sudden realize, we're running around here on 3 tires. That doesn't work. So the philosophy, the fact that I heard people go to Daytona and you always had a front sway bar in a race car, and telling me that, no, we took it out because of the way the suspension and the shocks were working now. This is what we can do. We don't have to have one. It's like, oh my gosh, where did that come from? You can't use a front sway bar, but this is where we are. This is the newly found cup car that a lot of these guys are finding that they can do different things to. And these engineers, they're worse than mad scientists at the moment, trying to figure out what is going to be the best thing for this race car for this weekend. I mean, when they get, and we talked about this last night on our show, Brad, the late shift, this rough racetrack is going to throw them all a big fit because they haven't been there in 2 years. The only guy to go out there and test, William Byron, he was testing. What does he do? He crashes. So, there was a bad crash. He still crashed. So, they didn't get all the information they really wanted and needed. And then they hear that they went back and reground the track some anyway. So here we go. Goodyear, NASCAR, the teams, you talking about going in and flying a little bit blind. This weekend will be that way. So, Goodyear is going to safety up and bring something they feel like is going to be durable. The teams are going to have to be willing to be flexible, and that their simulations and everything they did preparing are going to take all this stuff under consideration. And the guys I feel the worst for, the drivers, because when they get there, you may not get as much of adjustments as you'd like to have, and you got to live with it for this weekend. And so it's going to be another one of those exciting weekends of learning for this new car.
You know, Jeff, for years on pit road, and we still see it on Friday and Saturday with trucks in the Xfinity. Those cars have not changed yet in this way, but you know, so-and-so is coming in, they're going to get a track bar adjustment. That's gone. So-and-so is coming in, they're going to pull a spring rubber or put a spring rubber in. That's gone. Coilover springs. I mean, the things that we're doing on pit stops now, in some ways become even more limited because we don't have some of the tools now in the toolbox that as a crew chief you could go to help your driver get that balance he wants.
Now, what they have done, they've learned, and they're learning the hard way, that air pressure is going to be real critical. Tires, how they wear and everything like that, real critical. And Kelly, if you hadn't heard this, we were reading last night on our show, Brad and I were talking about 11 sets of tires, plus you can transfer your qualifiers in the Cup Series for this race this weekend, 500 miles, 200 laps. I picked up and looked at the paper on the second page, and guess how many tires the Xfinity gets? And they're running a 300-mile race, 150 laps. They get 6 sets. They get six sets.
6 for the entire weekend, not just for the race, for the weekend.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's going to be a nail biter for them as far as tire management and everything like that. And I guess it shows you the concern of how much this new car that we've got built, this next gen, they're able to go through the corners pretty dang quick, and they got them planted pretty hard too. But you're still sliding a lot. And so the tires are going to wear. And I think NASCAR and Goodyear are really kind of like playing it really super cautious. Hopefully they won't run out of tires this weekend, because this, to me, we're right back at what we used to run into at Darlington, for example, or the old Atlanta. This racetrack is going to grate these tires off like a cheese grater.
Yeah.
Against that. I love tire wear races. We need more of them.
I do too, when you got a driver that can manage tires.
That's right.
Yeah, good point. You know, a couple of comments here. Cost issues a challenge at every level, from hobby stocks to late models to cup cars, for sure. And look, we have seen a lot of times NASCAR changes a rule, and the team owners have been screaming, you got to save us from ourselves. But all of a sudden, they take, say, the 7 figures that they were spending developing faster pit guns and just move it on down the hallway into another department there. I think the team owners are really, truly interested in actually spending less money now and not having to move it around. And again, another comment, now I get it, it's a show, a test of individual companies' technology, same as Indy. I still think it's a little bit more of that, but the technology and the engineering comes into play. You know, I asked Ray Evernham a few years ago, we were at the SEMA show, and I said, Ray, if you took a car from 30 years ago, but now we know everything that we know about aerodynamics and engineering and all of that, you know, how different would the sport look? And, you know, he sort of took that question in a different direction and basically said, hey, here's the deal. You cannot put the genie back in the bottle. The fact is that we know more and more about these cars. And sometimes I like to look at it this way. And Kelly and Jeff, I don't know if you see it any different. NASCAR writes a rule to do something, and sometimes it is in the spirit of creating better competition and making the racing more exciting or whatever. And then literally all the teams do is they look at that and say, basically, well, how can we ruin this and over-engineer it to the point where we're all going the same speed and competition suffers as a result? I'm not saying they're literally thinking that, but that does become the end result. So that's why the sport really has to continue to evolve. And Kelly, I think we see it year over year. Something new comes out, and all of a sudden cautions go up, attrition goes up. And then those things level out, and then maybe we see a little less passing, a little harder to do things. And the next thing you know, another rule change comes out and it mixes up the game again.
Yeah, I mean, everything eventually works itself out. But as you were saying, the reason I started laughing is because it makes me think one of NASCAR's problems is always going to be that law of unintended consequences, right? NASCAR always thinks they're changing something for the better, and then we manage to mess it up, or just something happens that we weren't accounting for. So, but again, in the long run, it always works itself out.
I'd like to say one thing in closing about rules. When NASCAR started, the rules that NASCAR implemented at the first race was on one piece of paper, one piece, not front and back, just one piece. That's all the rules. Today, you got to have a computer and an engineer to know how to find all the rules to make sure you don't break a rule.
Yeah, that's true. Love all the comments, by the way, for sure. And it is always fun to just sit here and talk about racing. And look, everyone's got their own opinions on what they see. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't necessarily really care what's underneath the race car. I don't care what's underneath the hood of the race car, whatever. I want to see a finish like what we saw on Sunday. And that's two drivers coming to the start finish line with a margin of victory of 36 1,000ths of a second at the end of 500 miles. And if the competition's there, how we got there, to me, is a little bit less relevant. And look, if we can all, if Jeff's a Ford guy and Kelly's a Toyota lady and I'm a Chevy guy, that's great. If we can all debate that and talk about our favorite drivers, that's where a lot of the fun is. But the technology part of it's pretty cool as well.
But thank you very much. What a great show today. Thank you. That was really fun to watch you guys. And so we're going to wrap it up. It's been recorded. It will be available later on the EPARTRADE platform. It was streamed live on racer.com as well. And we will be back next Wednesday at 9 o'clock. We're going to do something we never did. We're going to bring a sports agent, a good friend of us, Reed Morales, and we're going to be talking about working with influencers and talent to promote your brand. So this is going to be a very interesting one. So thank you very much for being with us today, and we'll see you next week.
Registering on EPARTRADE is easy. Fill out your name, email, phone number, and create a secure password. Next, select your business type. Choose supplier if you're looking to display products or services and connect with buyers. Choose racing business if you're looking to find new parts and connect with suppliers. Choose race team if you own or are a member of a professional racing team. Begin typing your company name. We most likely already have your company in our database, which you can select from the drop-down. Then, enter your job title. Choose Claim Company if you'll be editing your company profile. Other members of your company can choose Join Company if they'd like to use EPARTRADE as well. You can view and agree to our terms of use here. If you'd like to receive our weekly newsletter, choose Accept. Click Register Now, and your registration will be submitted for approval. You'll need to confirm your email once it goes through. To keep our platform industry only, you'll be approved shortly after. If we require additional proof of business, we'll reach out. Welcome to EPARTRADE.